All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK McLeod, and we are jumping into another Training Tuesday episode. Training Tuesday episodes of the Help Me Understand podcast are typically going to be something training or fitness adjacent, whether we are talking specifically about working out or we're talking about something nutrition related or something mindset related to training and or nutrition. So we're just going to try to simplify things by calling it Training Tuesday here. Before getting into today's episode, where I'm going to address the question of how will I know if my maintenance phase is working, I always want to take a moment as soon as I can to say thank you for choosing to press play on Help Me Understand. You have no shortage of podcasts that you can listen to, so I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on this, the Help Me Understand podcast. So let's go ahead and get into today's topic. So again, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, I want to dig into maintenance and specifically some signs that from both my experience and the experience of multiple clients that I've worked with through maintenance phases, along with also fat loss and muscle gain, getting an understanding of how you can know if that phase is truly working for you, if you are truly on track when it comes to maintenance. Before we start getting into those specific signs, what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes reviewing exactly what a maintenance phase is and why it's important. And spoiler alert, maintenance is where we should be spending the majority of our year. So often, the majority of the marketing and content that you're going to consume is going to be around primarily fat loss and then some muscle building, and very rarely is even 50% probably of the content that you will actually stop your scrolling and consume going to be about maintenance. So history or historical analysis or analytics is the word I'm looking for when it comes to marketing says that this particular podcast episode is not going to do very well because it's about maintenance and it's not specifically about losing weight, losing body fat, trying to lose X amount of pounds before summer. So if you would like to help me in bucking that trend, then please share this via whatever social media platform you use, pass it on to a friend, a family member, maybe even pass it on to somebody that you don't like just because you want them to be more informed. So I would greatly appreciate that. So with getting into this, again, first, I want to start off with identifying what exactly is a maintenance phase. So when we talk about a maintenance phase, we are talking about a phase and a time frame where you are primarily eating roughly around what equals out to your total daily energy expenditure, your TDEE. So you are consuming around the same amount of energy that you also expend. And if you'd like to get a bit more, get more granular and get my perspective, along with the science on what goes into TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, I had to jot this down, back episode 197. 197 is called Burning Calories 101, all about TDEE. That particular episode, I did a super deep dive breakdown into all of the different things that go into burning calories throughout the day versus as opposed to folks think it's just, okay, however many calories I burn during my workout. And some folks end up being slightly disappointed realizing that how many calories you burn during your workout is very, very, very little in the grand scheme of things. So again, when it comes to understanding what a maintenance phase is, maintenance overall at its very most base definition is that you are consuming as much energy as you put out. So you're not specifically in a intentional deficit and you are not specifically in an intentional surplus. So over consuming or under consuming when it comes to your calories. So it also is a phase where you're not actively trying to lose body fat and or not actively trying to gain muscle mass. Now, I want to take a moment to clarify that in no way, shape, or form means that neither of those two things will happen during the maintenance phase. It just means that it's not something that you're actively pursuing by being in either a deficit where you're trying to lose body fat, or a specific surplus where you are trying to specifically either add weight or you're trying to add muscle mass. So want to be crystal clear on that. It doesn't mean that when you're in maintenance, and this is a common fear and or misconception, that you'd make no progress when you're in maintenance, and that's certainly not the case. So the purpose of a maintenance phase, there's three main things that I really will preach with focusing on during maintenance phase. And again, maintenance being the majority of the time that you are, if you break it down yearly, majority of your year, majority of the months should be in a maintenance phase. Number one, we are looking at restoring energy balance. So again, going back to total daily energy expenditure, if we were in a fat loss phase for however many weeks and or months, then we specifically were trying to consume less energy than we were putting out. So at this point, when we go into maintenance, we're trying to bring that back to a safe spot, what we call homeostasis, where your body feels safe and comfortable, and we'll start understanding, okay, we are back to normal, like we're back in our normal rhythm here. Second purpose that I jotted down when it comes to a maintenance phase would be supporting your overall training and recovery. So there's more of a focus on eating in a way that truly supports the performance that you're looking for versus, again, prioritizing being in a deficit. Because a lot of times where I'm really having this conversation is moving people from being in their fat loss phase for a while into maintenance and getting them really honed in on understanding how much better their training performance is going to be. So better supports your training and your recovery. And when we're talking about recovery, or when I talk about recovery, I got to stop saying we. When I'm talking about recovery, I am not just referring to recovery from your training. I'm also talking about recovery from your day-to-day activities and your lifestyle. I'm someone that considers myself to be what I call a lifestyle-centric coach. So I put your life at the things that matter to you at the center of how I design programs and how I coach and communicate with you, versus putting my program at the center of how I coach and I communicate. And then you've just got to figure out the lifestyle stuff around what I'm saying you need to do in your program. So again, a common misconception that can really come into play here when it comes to the maintenance phase is that maintenance equals doing nothing. And the reality is that maintenance is just as much of an active and intentional phase as muscle building and as losing body fat, just as much of an active and intentional phase. And again, it's really important because it will really stabilize the progress that you've had in those other phases and really just restore that safety and that homeostasis back to your body. All right. So now let's get into, I want to talk about something mindset-wise, why, from my perspective, I think that it can be really hard for people to trust I almost said something. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's hard to trust the process of maintenance. And when I say trust the process of maintenance, I find that it's difficult for people to trust that particular phase is something that is actually still part of the overall picture when it comes to continuing to improve their fitness and their health, both on the inside, so your internals, and both externally. Sometimes it can be really difficult to trust that this is a phase that you need to go through. And I want to share with you a few things that I came up with on why it can be hard to trust maintenance. And if any of these resonate with you, I would love to get any feedback that you've got. So the first one is that fat loss, really easy to trust fat loss because it has really specific, like visible markers, whether it be exactly how you look, it can be the weight on the scale, it can be your measurements, all that stuff. And when it comes down to maintenance may not have as apparent of markers as fat loss does. They may not necessarily be as visible. With fat loss, especially if you've done it correctly, it's pretty noticeable when you are in a fat loss phase because you notice that things look tighter, you look leaner, you are noticing that clothes fit dramatically differently. Like those are the things that are very, very apparent, not just to you, to others also. There's that external validation that's happening. Whereas with maintenance, you may still experience some of those things for sure. It just may not be as visible at the same rate, and probably isn't. Let me just remove the may not. It's not going to be as visible of a change and improvement and sustained process as fat loss at all. And that's okay. It's not supposed to be quite as drastic. Another thing is that maintenance can be hard to trust because it really feels like kind of quiet. Like it's not real sexy overall. As I started off, the first portion of this episode was saying, there's a strong likelihood that this particular episode is not going to do really well because maintenance isn't really like the majority of people aren't like super jazzed about listening to podcasts about maintenance. I kind of relate it to maintenance is like the super nice guy that you settle down and you marry. And fat loss is like the bad boy who is got like 6 other side chicks. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is that when it comes to maintenance, the scale may change both up and down. And if you are not either very, very secure with being able to ride that wave or working with a coach who can help you ride that wave, something that I talk to my clients about is like trying to keep it in the road, keep it in the middle of the road. And it's a phrase that's been passed down in my family, like keep it in the road, trying to keep things within like the middle, like average. If you are not super confident with doing that and you find yourself to be someone who reacts very quickly to extremes, like if the scale is up 2 pounds, you feel like, I'm totally screwing up my maintenance phase, then that can be really tough. And I want to acknowledge that. That is something that certainly comes up for my clients from time to time, where they'll say, it just seems like the scale is creeping up. And what we will do in a situation like that is really zoom out and get an understanding of, okay, well, let's get an understanding of how you, the client, are interpreting what you're seeing and talk to me about what you're feeling, because I don't discount or I guess like hit down, or I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but just generally, I really try not to discount or nullify the feelings that a client will have about certain data and or how just they generally feel. I think as a coach, that's one of the worst things that you can ever do. Feelings are feelings. I think it's also a different matter if you are letting those feelings be the primary driver for what the next best step is to take. So that's something that can make things very difficult. There also is the social pressure of when you are in maintenance, you're not specifically working on trying to get like much bigger, and you're not working on trying to get a whole lot smaller. So it's very easy if somebody says, hey, what are you focusing on right now? And I actually had this happen to me recently because I'm in maintenance right now. So I recently had someone who approached me while I was eating lunch, and they just asked like, hey, how are things going for you as far as like, your goals? What are you working on right now? I'm like, yeah, I'm just keeping it in the road, man, just maintaining. And they're like, oh, okay. So just kind of not really working on a whole lot. And we have a pretty good relationship. So it's kind of turned into a running joke now where it's just like, yeah, I'm just floating through life, not working through a lot, just kind of got lazy and let go of my goals. And as much as I say that like sarcastically, that is something that that is a story that folks will tell themselves. And you may even, like I did, get an external comment that you may feel like validates that story. And at the end of the day, people may assume that you're stuck because you're not specifically trying to lose weight and you're not going like crazy trying to gain a whole bunch of muscle. You're trying to keep it in the road, as I said. And maintenance to some people or many people may not seem like it's an actual intentional phase. And got news for you. They're wrong. It is an intentional phase. And again, should be the majority of your year. And then the last piece that I've got on why I believe it can be hard to really trust that process of maintenance before I get into some signs that you'll know that you're on the right track is that maintenance really does require an internal mindset shift where you start to learn to value consistency versus learning to value what I'll call chaos, and chaos in a good way. So you learn to value being the steady Eddie. You learn to value being able to show up to your workouts pretty consistently. You learn to be able to value having a good level of pretty much a consistent level of energy. You learn to value being able to show up as the person you want to show up as, because you're not constantly consumed by, okay, am I eating enough or too little, or, how many grams of protein did I have right now, versus I call it valuing the chaos, where you just kind of are jazzed about like having a really super hard, like white knuckle, okay, I'm just going to get down to business with this fat loss phase. We're going to grind it out. And it's like starve myself, do whatever I got to do. Because sometimes in fat loss, you do have to do some really unsustainable things to get the result that you're looking for. And also, you can't really live like that all the time. It's kind of like folks who just are really comfortable with something always being crazy in their life. They just get really comfortable with that. Maintenance is basically the opposite of that, of valuing consistency over like the occasional just crazy thing. All right, so now let's get into the meat of things here. So I jotted down 7 signs where you can know that you're on the right track when it comes to your maintenance phase. I will go ahead and just put this out there ahead of time. I don't intend this to be inclusive of absolutely everything. So if you do have some additional signs that you're thinking of, then I'd love to hear about those. You'll have information in the show notes, how you can shoot me a DM or you can shoot me an email and let me know if there are some other signs that maybe I missed, because I don't get it all. So I wrote down here. So sign number 1, generally when someone is on the right track with maintenance, I look for their weight to stay within, I'm going to call it around 5-ish pounds of their particular goal weight range. So an example that I will use, and I'll be pretty open about this, is generally I'm trying to think, I haven't weighed myself in about a week or so because I'm out of town right now. But I would say generally, if I am hanging out somewhere around 3 to 238-ish, then I'm probably on the right track. I'm just kind of ballparking here, but just kind of guesstimating. So just generally, if your weight is staying around 5-ish pounds of your goal, and this is not just on a specific day. This is when you look at weekly or monthly averages, it's around 5 pounds of your goal weight range, then you're probably good. Understanding that daily fluctuations are going to be normal. So you need to understand looking at trends, not just I weighed myself this Sunday and that's what I'm going to gauge like my existence on. That's probably not a very healthy way to go. And also a sign that you are on the right track when it comes to your weight is that you're not really panicking every time like something changes by half a pound, because that is a portion. Again, if we use the analogy of a car going down like a 5-lane highway, let's say you're taking a cross-country road trip, you're probably not going to stay in the same lane the entire time that you're going from like New York to California. You are probably going to need to switch some lanes here and there. So the goal is to get where you need to go. So that may require shifting over to the left, shifting over to the right. It doesn't mean all of a sudden if you're in the slow lane for 20 miles that all of a sudden you're off track. No, you're still making your way where you need to. You're just in the slow lane for a bit. So keep that in mind. So that's sign number 1. Your weight is going to stay around 5-ish pounds of your goal. All right. Sign number 2 is also very similar. Your overall measurements tend to be pretty stable. And the main areas that I find that folks are typically focusing on, I primarily work with women. I work with a few men here and there. And that's not based on specifically how I market. It's just who reaches out for the most part. So the areas that we're primarily focusing on are going to be like waist to hip ratio. So waist measurement, hip measurement, and midsection for sure. I would say just generally, that if those measurements are staying within about 1 inch to maybe 2 inches, if we're hovering right around there on average, again, it's not one particular day, similar to when you weigh in, then we're probably on the right track. And then also, I really, really enjoy when people are utilizing clothing as somewhat of a barometer or one of the main barometers, quite honestly, when it comes to understanding if they are within a maintenance range. So if you've got a pair of shorts, we're coming up on summer here, we've got a pair of shorts, we've got a particular t-shirt that we wear, and let's keep it a buck here. Like we're all aware of how certain shirts fit us around the midsection versus other ones, and skirts. Like I don't wear skirts these days, but for those that wear skirts, you're aware of how those particular things hit you in certain areas of your body. So if you are noticing for the most part that those things fit about the same, maybe even better, because again, when it comes to maintenance, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden any sort of body composition improvement stops. If you're finding that clothing fits about the same or better, you are likely on the right track. All right, sign number 3, and this is my second. Well, I just looked at the ones that I have listed. Never mind. I was going to say this is my second favorite, but the next 3 that are coming up are all 3 probably all my favorites. I would not be able to decide which one. So sign number 3, your energy levels are consistent. And this one is one of my favorite realizations that clients have when they have worked themselves through fat loss and are now getting in more food, and they are finding, man, it just feels good to feel good again. And this is coming with feedback. And I've noticed this myself and multiple clients over close to a decade of doing this now. This is coming from clients who didn't necessarily hit a prolonged period during their fat loss phase where they just felt like they were just a hot mess and like couldn't stay awake. They were dealing with their fat loss phase just fine, understanding sometimes you just gotta kind of embrace the suck, right? What they found though is after starting to work back into maintenance, they reported back, man, I guess I didn't realize that I actually was kind of not feeling my best as far as my overall energy level. One of the main things that came up was no more afternoon crashes, that kind of like 2 to 3 p.m. or 1 to 3 p.m. lull. It's like a universal lull time where it's like the post lunch / midday snooze where it just kind of happens. So they were noticing they weren't necessarily feeling that as much anymore. They were realizing that they were able to get better sleep, which I'll talk about in just a couple more bullet points here. Waking up with a bit more energy, not necessarily like jumping out of bed and doing cartwheels, but not feeling super sluggish all the time. And then just generally not really dragging throughout the day. So not having these like super high highs and super low lows. They were finding that things were really pretty well balanced throughout the day. So again, sign number 3 that you are on the right track with maintenance is that your energy levels are pretty consistent. All right, we're getting into the last few here. This next one, sign number 4 that you are on the right track with maintenance, your workouts are feeling better. This one is super hard to top. And the things that we will notice in terms of workouts feeling better, we're noticing that clients are getting stronger. So they're able to implement the progressions and then notice the stimulus of progressive overload is actually happening. So they're noticing that maybe they're hitting PRs here and there. They're noticing that they're able to recover from their workouts better. They're able to lift a little bit heavier, which is where the PRs come into play. They can squeeze out a few more reps than they thought they could. They're able to even not just the training, the weightlifting workouts itself. This is where I start getting the messages of, hey, do you mind if I add a little cardio to the end of this because I still got a lot of energy? Or do you mind if I add a workout class because I know I'm training 3 days this week, but I'm feeling really good and I just wanted to drop into this Zumba class that I haven't done in a while. And I'm always like, you go forth and do your thing. Just let me know like what the thought process is behind it. But very rarely am I a coach who says, no, you can't do that. I am very much the help me understand. So the title of this podcast is part of my language where I'll say, well, help me understand what's got you wanting to do that. And many times when somebody's in a maintenance phase, they will report back like, it just feels good to finally feel good again. And I'd like to really like use this energy. Okay, cool. They're also noticing wanting to do more activities with their kids. So whereas maybe during a fat loss phase, it was a lot of like I'm trying to just keep them busy because I just want to lay on the couch. Now it's like, I want to take them for a walk. I want to go play basketball with them, different things like that. So that stuff is really cool. we'll also notice that endurance starts to improve. And that's really related to a few of the things I just talked about with working out. Just noticing that they're able to last for longer. I'm also going to throw this in too. It's not specifically like a workout. They're also noticing libido is going back up and or is sustaining at a level that's like through the roof. So that is something that people will, I mean, we're adults here, respectfully, they'll report back like, yeah, things are like A+ in that particular department, just because you're fully fueled and you're feeling really good. So just generally, folks tend to feel like they're performing instead of just kind of surviving. So thriving, not surviving, to get through their day. All right. This one is the sign number 5 is all about sleep. And this one is really potentially the most important one. As sexy as like the working out stuff can be, and as sexy as like having a bunch of energy throughout the day, just the benefit of making sure that you've got enough in the tank from a nutrition standpoint where you're properly executing your maintenance also will lead to typically an improvement in your sleep. So things that you notice are that you tend to fall asleep easier. So maybe you're noticing that it doesn't take you as long to fall asleep. You potentially are also noticing that there's not as much of like the late night hunger that's happening, or these like off cycle kind of wacky early morning wake ups that maybe were going on when you were specifically in a deficit. Now, a lot of this also in conjunction with eating enough also has to do with, for many folks, nutrient timing and nutrient quality. So quantity, quality going together along with the timing. That's like kind of the 3-headed monster when it comes to sleep. I find that when you focus on those 3 things, that's where you really have nailed like what I was going to say what I call, I've just made this up off the top of my head, the sleep trifecta. So eating enough, including enough quality, and eating it at the right times for you. I want to specify for you. I don't think there's like a magic eating window. This one I jotted down, and I just want to, they have to do with nutrition, but I jotted down and really could combine the last 2 together. So I put down that sign number 6 is that you're not obsessively tracking your food. So in a maintenance phase, more often than not, especially because I am a trainer first who also understands and is certified in nutrition, but I'm a trainer first who focuses on getting into the down and dirty details with your training. And I focus on sleep and nutrition from more of a habit structure formation foundational piece so that it supports your overall training. So I am typically, I was thinking of my clients that I have right now. I can't think of any clients that I have right now who are specifically tracking more than I'd say like twice a week for the most part, with the exception of a couple that are in fat loss phases right now. And even with that being in a fat loss phase, there's at least one day that I recommend not tracking. But just to put that out there as an explicit bias that I do have, it's nothing that I hide, is generally I tend to focus on nutrition more from the standpoint of basic foundational habits and a structure and systems that are in place on getting in enough with quantity and quality versus, hey, you need to specifically hit this and specifically hit that. We will do that when it comes to fat loss from time to time. But what we find is that within fat loss, we're focusing on getting more meticulous after we've already spent the majority of the time really establishing a foundation. So just keeping that in mind. So I put sign number 6 that you are on the right track with your maintenance is you're not obsessively tracking. You're very comfortable with eyeballing particular portions. You still eat what I call attentively, not mindful, attentive eating. So attentive eating, as I describe it, is that when you sit down to eat, you're actually savoring your meal. You're enjoying your meal. It's not that you're always looking at a screen. Really, the screen's like the big thing. So you're either focusing on the person that's with you, you're maybe reading a book, you're listening to something, like you're doing something that allows you to still savor the food that you are eating. And you also really just feel like you have an overall sense of flexibility and freedom with what you're doing within reason. So freedom with guardrails with it. Okay. So gotta keep it 100 here. Maintenance. That's why I talk about the fact that maintenance is not about like just doing whatever, YOLO when I feel like it fabulous. Like it's also about paying attention to what are the general guardrails that you have. Again, let's think road trip. going down a 5-lane highway. There's still a shoulder on each side, and there's still guardrails to keep you from going completely off the road, but you've got 5 lanes to work with. So during maintenance, you ideally are working in maybe the middle 3 lanes. Maybe sometimes you're going all the way to the left or all the way to the right, but you basically focus on the middle 3. Whereas if it's something like a fat loss phase, you maybe are only working with 2 lanes because you need much more structure, or maybe even 1 lane. So just keeping that in mind. Then sign number 7, as we kind of wrap this up here, sign number 7 that you are on the right track when it comes to being in maintenance is that food does not control you. So I know related somewhat to number 6, but number 6 was about not specifically being like obsessed with tracking. Number 7 is just the overall mindset around food. Like, food doesn't control everything that you do. You can go out and you can enjoy a meal or a treat, however you define that, and it doesn't send you into some sort of a spiral. And just overall, you just don't really feel a whole lot of guilt around eating certain things. You don't feel like you need to make up for it with adjusting your workouts because, now, okay, I got to go for a run because I need to burn off my bad decisions. Like, that's no es bueno on that. Like, definitely not good with that. So hopefully this is helpful. Those are 7 signs that you can know that you're on the right track when it comes to maintenance. All right, so let's close things out here. So something that I was thinking about as I was jotting down some notes for this particular episode is that I like to call maintenance the quiet confidence phase. So it's not super sexy. It's not something that's going to like attract a whole lot of people. However, it's where you really can stabilize your relationship with yourself, stabilize your relationship with food, stabilize your relationship with training, and stabilize your relationships with what actually matters to you. This is something that I talk about with what I call the 4A framework, which I did a previous episode on that. I call it the 4A framework. And the 4 A's are: first, we do an assessment, then we come to an awareness of what's going on, then we come up with action steps, but we need to make sure that the action steps are part of that 4th A, which is alignment. So alignment, this is a big part of the maintenance phase, is understanding like the pieces that are within your guardrails. So the guardrails that you have established, are they in alignment with what actually matters to you? So that's all part of that quiet confidence of I'm doing the work, I'm still in it. It's not about like seeing massively different things, even though there will likely be improvements that you still make. They are going to be at a much slower rate. And I think that's something that coaches, or my observation is that many coaches need to be more honest with people around maintenance phases when it comes to saying, yeah, you can still make improvement in maintenance. It's just going to take a bit longer than fat loss. Now, in a maintenance phase, it's not going to take a bit longer than fat loss. It's going to take at least twice as long, if not 3 times as long. And it's supposed to take longer because you're not you're not specifically in any sort of like a drastic or even moderate deficit. You are likely trying to, again, balance things out from an energy expenditure and intake standpoint. So just keeping that in mind. A couple of things I jotted down. Maintenance is fantastic because it's when you can feel strong and not just look like you're strong. So the aesthetic progress definitely can be there during maintenance. And also you can feel as good as you look in maintenance. Those folks who've gone to like the deep depths in fat loss will tell you, when you go to the deep depths in fat loss, you may look fantastic, but the time where you may look your quote unquote best to those people around you, more likely than not, might not be the time where you actually feel your absolute best. Take it to the extreme and ask a bikini competitor if like, what's the best that you've ever looked on stage? And then ask them, what's the best that you've ever felt? And likely the time that they looked the best on stage is not the time that they felt their best internally. And that is for a purpose. There's a whole reason behind that. So just wanted to spend some time today talking to you about those signs that you are on track, doing what you need to within your maintenance phase. So again, if you'd like to do me a favor and share this episode with someone who needs to hear that staying steady is progress, maintenance is still progress, I would sincerely appreciate that. Please, if you do have a moment to support our sponsor, which is Feed Your Habits. Feed Your Habits is apparel. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, both hoodies and crew necks. Also very shortly coming out with some new crop tops and a new line of tees. This will be out within the next week or so here if you're listening to in real time. So if you're listening in around the middle of May, then that line will be out. I'm not going to reveal the name of it quite yet, but hop on to feedyourhabits.com. And if you put in the promo code JKFYH at checkout, that's in all caps, JKFYH, you will get not only our standard free shipping in the US, you will also get an additional 10% off of your order. So certainly appreciate any and all support that we can get there, because when you support Feed Your Habits, you support the Help Me Understand podcast. So with that, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Help Me Understand. I sincerely appreciate it. Take care and have a great day. I'll talk to you next time.